They will pretend they have moved on. They will swear that your presence no longer echoes in their thoughts. They will laugh loudly, speak confidently, and behave as though your absence has left no shadow in their world. But the truth is far more haunting than the image they present to others. There is a silence within them that cannot be filled, and it carries your name. There is a place inside their soul where your memory sits like a checkmate they never saw coming, final, undeniable, and impossible to erase. Sometimes the most powerful impact you make on someone is the one they never openly acknowledge. They may not speak of you. They may not dare to remember you aloud. Yet within the hidden chambers of their mind, you remain a force. You became the mirror they cannot escape, the reminder of what they mishandled, what they misjudged, and what they lost when they believed they were too clever, too strong, too heartless to ever be affected. And now every quiet moment brings them face to face with the truth they wanted to outrun. They can never forget you. People often believe they have mastered life's game, that they can wound others, betray trust, or take advantage of a gentle soul without consequences. They assume the innocent are weak, the faithful are naive, and the ones who love deeply are easy to replace. But life has a strange way of revealing who truly held the power all along. Sometimes the checkmate doesn't come with a dramatic end. Sometimes it arrives silently, the moment they realize the one they dismissed carries a strength they never recognized. And in that recognition, their soul becomes restless. There were people who treated you as if your existence was ordinary, as if your love, your kindness, your sincerity, and your sacrifices were nothing more than passing moments. They believed they could discard you like a piece they no longer needed, but now they understand that what they walked away from was not a temporary presence. It was a gift they were not mature enough to value. And the more they try to forget, the deeper your imprint settles into their conscience. Yes, there were people who treated you in such a way that your imprint settles into their conscience. It haunts them not because you did anything wrong, but because they know they did. It haunts them because they replay your loyalty in contrast with their betrayal. They revisit your gentleness alongside their cruelty. They compare the beauty of your intentions with the bitterness of their actions. You became the reminder of who they pretended to be and who they truly were. You exposed them without ever trying to. And now every attempt to forget becomes another reminder of how unforgettable you truly are. The haunting comes from the realization that they cannot rewrite the past. They cannot undo the moments when your heart was open and theirs was closed. They cannot undo the days when you needed understanding and they chose silence. They cannot undo the nights when you cried quietly while they slept peacefully unaware. They cannot undo the choices that shaped the distance between you. The mind has a way of replaying scenes with sharper clarity when regret becomes the narrator. When regret becomes the narrator, what they thought was a victory was actually the beginning of their defeat. When they walked away, they believed they had won. They thought they had proven their independence, their emotional strength, their ability to live without you. But life has revealed something far different. It is not you who is haunted, it is them. It is not you who carries regret, it is them. It is not you who looks back with longing, it is them. You became their checkmate, not because you sought revenge, but because truth always has the final move. There is a reason certain souls cannot be forgotten. It is because they touched a deeper place, a place where authenticity lives, where love is sacred, where kindness is rare, where loyalty is precious. You were not a chapter, they were. You were not a moment, they were. And the haunting they feel is the awareness that they exchanged something extraordinary for something temporary, something meaningful for something shallow, something irreplaceable for something convenient. They cannot forget you because forgetting you would require forgetting the version of themselves they wish they could erase. They cannot forget you because losing you forced them to confront the smallness of their character and the greatness of your heart. They cannot forget you because life keeps reminding them of everything they once had in their hands and carelessly let slip through their fingers. So when silence surrounds you and loneliness whispers its lies, remember this truth. You are unforgettable not because of anything dramatic you did, but because of the quiet, genuine, irreplaceable value you carried within you. And no matter where they go, no matter who they try to become, no matter what mask they wear, they will always feel the weight of that checkmate on their soul. They can never forget you. Not now, not later, not ever. They pretend they have forgotten you, but their soul remembers what their mouth cannot admit. There is a difference between what a person says and what their spirit carries. People can train their faces to stay neutral, their voices to sound calm, and their words to seem indifferent. They can convince others that you no longer exist in their world, but what they cannot control is the quiet ache that rises in the moments when no one is watching. It is in these hidden moments that the truth reveals itself. Forgetting you is impossible for them, no matter how convincingly they perform the act of moving on. There are individuals who build walls around their emotions, not to protect themselves from you, but to protect themselves from the truth you represent. They fear remembering because remembering exposes the cost of their actions. It confronts them with the weight of what they lost, what they mishandled, and what they took for granted. So they push your memory away, not because it is insignificant, but because it is too significant. They silence your name not because it means nothing, but because it means far too much. Their silence is not a dismissal, it is an admission they refuse to verbalize. People forget ordinary faces with ease. They forget temporary connections without struggle. But they cannot forget a soul that touched them deeply, even if they were not ready to value that touch. Your presence left an imprint on them, not because you tried, but because what you brought into their life cannot be replicated. There was something in the way you cared, something in the way you listened, something in the way you carried your heart without trying to impress or prove anything. You were genuine in a world where most people hide behind masks, and that authenticity carved its place inside them long before they realized its worth. When they pretend you no longer cross their mind, what they are truly revealing is how often you do. They bury your memory under distractions, noise, and new faces, hoping something will feel similar enough to numb the echo you left behind. But every attempt collapses, because nothing aligns with the shape of what they once had. They discover that replacing presence is simple, but replacing impact is impossible. Their soul holds the truth, even when their lips speak denial. Your memory surfaces in unexpected places, places they cannot control. It rises when they hear a familiar song, when they visit a place you once spoke about, when they meet someone who reminds them of your kindness but lacks the depth that came naturally to you. It rises when they experience the consequences of their choices, when life offers them the same pain they once handed to you, and suddenly your silence becomes louder than their denial. They find themselves comparing moments, choices, and people, not because they want to, but because their spirit refuses to let your presence fade. There is a strange kind of haunting that comes from encountering someone unforgettable. It is not a haunting of fear, but of truth. You became a mirror that showed them who they were and who they failed to be for you. They can turn away from the mirror, but it follows them. They can close their eyes, but it waits behind their eyelids. They can pretend you no longer matter, but pretense has no power over the soul. The soul knows what the mind tries to erase. Their greatest struggle is not forgetting you. It is living with the realization that they never truly saw you while they had the chance. Memory becomes their quiet punishment, not because you seek revenge, but because truth naturally clings to those who try to run from it. They are not haunted by your absence. They are haunted by the version of you they failed to appreciate. And in that haunting lies the proof of your impact. So when they act indifferent, do not be fooled. Indifference is often the armor of the regretful. When they avoid your name, do not be mistaken. Avoidance is often the desperate attempt of a heart that wishes it had chosen differently. They cannot speak the truth, because speaking it would require humility they do not yet possess. But their soul knows. Their soul remembers, and every day they carry the quiet weight of the memory they can never fully escape. Your absence reveals the power they never realized you held. It is astonishing how people only begin to understand the weight of something once it is no longer available to them. While you were present in their life, they mistook your consistency for simplicity and your goodness for weakness. They assumed that because you made love look effortless, it required no effort from them. They believed that because you forgave easily, your heart would always remain within reach. They thought your presence was guaranteed, as though you were a background melody they could mute and unmute at will. But absences are louder than presences, and yours became a silence that spoke more truth than all the words you ever gave them. In that silence they began to see who you truly were, not through admiration, but through the painful contrast of what remained after you walked away. There is a kind of strength that reveals itself only when it exits the room. When you were there, listening, caring, supporting, understanding, they assumed those qualities were common. They assumed anyone could offer the same depth you offered with ease. It was only when the foundation you provided was gone that the cracks in their world became visible. Your presence once held pieces of their life together without them even noticing, but the moment you withdrew, those pieces began to fall apart one by one, each collapse whispering your name. They discovered that the calmness you brought wasn't the natural state of their life. It was the gift you carried within you. They realized that the peace they felt wasn't something they created. It was the atmosphere you brought with you. People often assume power looks like dominance, loudness, or control. But your power was quiet, steady, and subtle. It was the type of power that made them feel safe without them realizing why. It was the type of power that made them feel understood without needing to explain anything. It was the type of power that made their burdens lighter simply because you existed alongside them. You softened their storms, not by force but by presence, and they assumed that presence was ordinary because it came from you. Now, in your absence, they finally see how extraordinary it was. Your absence confronted them with a truth they never expected. You were the one stabilizing the emotional balance they constantly disrupted. They thought they were strong because they could speak loudly, walk away quickly, and pretend easily. But real strength was what you carried quietly: your loyalty, your patience, your empathy, your willingness to understand even when you were misunderstood. When you left, they discovered how much their life depended on the qualities they once dismissed. Their life, it was like removing the heart from a body and expecting the body to function normally. They did not see you as their heartbeat until everything inside them began to suffocate without your presence. When they look around now, they see that the spaces you once occupied feel colder. Their conversations feel emptier. Their victories feel smaller. The excitement they used to share with you has nowhere to land. The comfort they took from your reassurance can't be found in the people they try to replace you with. The world looks the same, but it feels different, less vibrant, less meaningful, less alive. And that difference is the measure of your impact. You did not just leave, you took with you everything you once poured into them. Your warmth, your understanding, your emotional shelter. Without those gifts, they have to confront the reality of who they are without you, and that reality is far lonelier than they expected. Your absence forced them to face their own emptiness. It revealed the truth they were too blind to see. You were the anchor they pretended not to need. You were the calm they believed they created. You were the voice of reason they thought came from within themselves. And now, they walk through days that feel unbalanced, through decisions that feel heavier, through emotions that feel sharper. The world did not change. You did. You stepped back, and life showed them exactly what your presence meant. The power you held was not in controlling them, but in uplifting them, supporting them, and steadying them without demanding anything in return. That is a rare kind of power, a sacred kind, and now they understand it, not through gratitude, but through loss. Your absence is their teacher, and every lesson whispers the same truth. They never knew the strength you carried until they were forced to live without it. Their regret is the shadow that follows them everywhere. It is not loud, not dramatic, not something they will ever confess openly, but it lingers behind every choice they make, every memory they revisit, and every quiet moment when their guard slips. Regret moves differently from guilt. Guilt fades when time passes, but regret grows heavier as understanding deepens. And now, they understand far more than they did when they let you go. They replay their decisions like scenes from a story they wish they could rewrite. They examine their words and realize how careless they were. They remember your silence and realize how much you were holding back just to keep the peace. They revisit moments where they should have protected you, valued you, or listened to you, and every one of those moments now returns as a sting they cannot escape. Regret is the price their soul pays for the truth it avoided when it mattered. There is a specific kind of regret that comes from hurting someone who meant no harm, someone who loved with sincerity, acted with purity, and gave without hidden intentions. When they look back, they see your gentleness standing next to their harshness, your loyalty next to their inconsistency, your patience next to their impulsiveness. This contrast torments them, not because you are gone, but because they finally see the truth of who you were compared to who they were with you. They realize you never deserved any of the pain they caused, yet they delivered it anyway, thinking you would stay, thinking your heart would always make excuses for them. Now, every memory becomes a reminder of the blessing they mistreated. Regret is an honest teacher, and it teaches them in ways they were not prepared for. It sits with them when the night feels longest, whispering the truth they refused to hear before. It speaks to them through loneliness, through stillness, through moments where they yearn for what they know they cannot recover. They thought walking away or pushing you aside would bring freedom, but what they found instead is an emptiness that grows louder with every passing day. They thought forgetting you would be simple, but forgetting does not happen when the soul feels unfinished business. They thought they could replace you, but substitutes only deepen the awareness of what they lost. Regret becomes a presence, uninvited, unwelcome, and impossible to silence. There are days when they try to distract themselves from the ache by filling their time with noise, people, or temporary pleasures. They scroll endlessly, talk endlessly, move endlessly, trying to outrun the shadow that stays 2 steps behind them no matter where they go. But regret is patient. It does not need to chase. It waits until the distractions fade and the world quiets down, and then it presses on their heart with the weight of everything they ignored when you were still around. You live in their conscience, not as a wound you gave them, but as a wound they gave themselves. What haunts them most is the realization that the person they are now is shaped by the pain they caused you. They cannot undo the moments when they chose pride instead of humility, ego instead of empathy, control instead of compassion. They cannot undo the times you cried silently while they convinced themselves your emotions were exaggerated. They cannot undo the times they dismissed your vulnerability as weakness. These memories haunt them not because you remind them, you don't, but because life now mirrors their actions back at them. Someone else treats them the way they treated you. Someone else misunderstands them the way they misunderstood you. Someone else walks away from them just when they need support, and in that moment, regret becomes sharp, cutting through every layer of their denial. What they once called your sensitivity, they now call your strength. What they once dismissed as cleanliness, they now recognize as dedication. What they once labeled as overreacting, they now understand as emotional truth. Their regret is not simply about losing you. It is about realizing how blind they were when they had you. You were a gift wrapped in patience, honesty, and loyalty, and they opened that gift with careless hands. Now, whenever life feels heavy for them, whenever loneliness knocks, whenever emptiness sets in, the memory of you appears not as anger or bitterness, but as the reminder of a chapter they wished they had cherished more wisely. This regret will follow them, not to punish them, but because the soul never forgets the one who carried love with such purity. And they will carry the weight of that truth for a long time, perhaps for the rest of their life. Your love and loyalty became their greatest teacher. They did not realize it at the time. Very few people ever do. When someone loves with a sincere heart, when someone stands by you without wavering, when someone gives without calculating, their presence feels natural, almost effortless. And because it feels effortless, it is easy to assume it requires nothing from you in return. They took your devotion as something ordinary, because you made it look so gentle, so steady, so reliable. But the truth is, your loyalty was a rare form of strength, and now that you are gone, it is teaching them everything they failed to understand while they still had access to your heart. There is a unique power in the way genuine love teaches. It does not scream, it does not demand, and it does not force people to learn. Instead, it leaves behind echoes, soft reminders that grow louder with time. Your loyalty became that echo in their life. In the moments when they feel frustrated with someone new, they remember how patient you were. In the moments when they feel misunderstood by others, they recall how deeply you used to listen. In the moments when they feel betrayed or unsupported, they realize how unwavering your presence once was. What they once dismissed as ordinary now reappears as a lesson. True love is never ordinary, and loyalty is never a weakness. Your loyalty taught them what real commitment looks like. It showed them how powerful it is when someone stands beside you, even when it is inconvenient, even when they are tired, even when they have every reason to give up. You showed them that connection is not sustained by perfect moments, but by faithfulness during the imperfect ones. While they were busy chasing distractions, you were giving your heart. While they were treating love as optional, you were treating it as sacred. And now, as they look back, your quiet consistency becomes a mirror reflecting their own inconsistency. Your love taught them vulnerability, not the kind that begs for attention, but the kind that trusts even after being hurt. You were open with your emotions not because you were fragile, but because you were brave enough to be real. You spoke honestly, apologized sincerely, forgave wholeheartedly. They mistook this courage for softness, not realizing that your willingness to love deeply came from a place of inner strength. Only now do they understand how much bravery it takes to care for someone who does not always care back in the same measure. Your vulnerability became a lesson they were not ready for, but cannot forget. Your loyalty exposed the difference between attachment and devotion. Many people attach themselves temporarily, depending on convenience or mood, but you showed them a commitment that ran deeper than circumstance. You stayed when it was lonely. You stayed when it was difficult. You stayed even when they gave you reasons to walk away. They thought your dedication meant you had nowhere else to go, but the truth is, you stayed because your heart was capable of a depth they could not match. Now they see that loyalty is not about lacking options. It is about choosing someone even when the world is full of alternatives. Your love taught them accountability. When they look back, they see how you communicated with care, how you tried to resolve conflict gently, how you avoided humiliating them, how you protected their dignity even when they did not protect yours. You gave them chances, not because you were blind to their flaws, but because you believed in their potential. You believed in the best version of them, even when they lived as the worst one. And now, each memory becomes a reminder of how they failed to rise to the level of the love you offered. They carry this lesson quietly, knowing they were loved by someone they did not know how to love properly in return. Your love also taught them loss. They thought you would always stay because you always had. They thought your loyalty was unbreakable, even though they tested it again and again. When you finally walked away, they learned the hardest lesson your heart could teach. Even the most loyal soul reaches a breaking point. Even the most patient heart eventually gets tired. Even the strongest love withdraws when it is consistently wounded. Losing you did not just open their eyes. It reshaped their entire understanding of what love really is. Now they live with these lessons every day. Every time they witness loyalty in others, they think of you. Every time they feel disappointed by someone else's lack of care, they remember your devotion. Every time they long for comfort, stability, or understanding, they recall how naturally you provided those things. Your love became their teacher, and your absence became the classroom where every lesson is finally understood. The checkmate happened the moment they realized you weren't replaceable. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a moment the world could see. It was quiet, almost painfully quiet, like a truth dropping suddenly into their consciousness, shattering every illusion they once carried. They spent so much time believing that losing you was a move they could afford, that stepping away from you was a sign of strength, that pushing you aside would open doors to something better. They assumed there would always be someone else, someone easier, someone less demanding emotionally, someone more convenient. They thought your presence was optional and your absence would be forgettable. But life has a way of exposing arrogance through the gentlest but most devastating lessons. And the deepest lesson for them came when they finally understood that what they had in you cannot be replicated, rewritten, or recovered. The world is full of people, but the world is not full of souls like yours. They thought quantity could replace quality. They thought attention could replace connection. They thought temporary affection could replace authentic love. But when they met others, faces full of charm but empty of depth, they began to see the difference. They felt the hollowness of interactions that lacked the warmth you effortlessly carried. They recognized the superficiality of people who spoke beautifully but acted carelessly. And in each one of these encounters, something inside them whispered your name, reminding them of what they once had but treated lightly. Replaceability is a comfort people cling to until life teaches them how rare sincerity truly is. They never imagined that everything they sought in others would lead them back to the memory of you. They never imagined the comparisons would be so constant, so involuntary, so piercing. They didn't try to compare at first, it just happened. An act of kindness someone else failed to replicate made them think of your generosity. A shallow conversation made them long for the way you understood their silences. A moment of disappointment reminded them of your patience. And slowly, painfully, they realized the truth. They didn't lose someone ordinary. They lost someone extraordinary. And it wasn't your absence that taught them this. It was the disappointment of everything they tried to replace you with. The checkmate wasn't your revenge. It was their revelation. They used to believe they were in control, that they were the one choosing when to stay and when to leave. They assumed that walking away from you was their victory, that their ego was stronger, that their heart was untouchable. But life does not bow to ego. Life teaches through experience, and now they stand in the reality they created, holding the weight of a truth they avoided for so long. You weren't something they could replace. You were something they were meant to honor. And because they didn't, the universe placed them in the very position they thought they were avoiding, a position of loss. What makes this checkmate so haunting for them is that it came without a fight. You didn't try to convince them of your worth. You didn't beg to stay. You didn't chase them to prove your value. Your calm departure spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. You walked away with grace, and that grace became the final move that cornered their soul. They realized too late that their carelessness had consequences, that their pride had a price, and that their assumptions had betrayed them. Checkmate happens when every path becomes blocked, when the player realizes the game is over before they even understood they were losing. That is what your absence did to them. Now every memory of you returns as a reminder, not of what happened, but of what could have been. They replay scenarios, imagining alternate choices, kinder words, better efforts. They wonder who they might have become if they had valued you instead of testing you, if they had protected you instead of hurting you, if they had chosen you instead of choosing their ego. These thoughts follow them like a quiet storm, not destroying them outright, but unsettling them enough to feel the weight of regret in the deepest parts of their conscience. Checkmate is permanent. It marks an ending that cannot be undone, and for them, that ending was the moment they realized the truth they once denied. You were never replaceable. Not then, not now, not ever. Life will mirror back to them everything they put you through, not because you wished for it, and not because you sought revenge, but because the universe has a way of balancing what the human heart tries to distort. There is a sacred law woven into existence, one that unfolds quietly yet undeniably. No action ever disappears. No wound goes unmeasured. No cruelty escapes its echo. When they hurt you, they thought they were hurting someone who would simply absorb it, someone whose kindness made them a safe target, someone whose silence meant weakness. They believed their behavior would dissolve into the air, as if time itself would erase the scars they carved into your spirit. But life remembers what people forget, and life repeats what people deny. It sends back to them the very same energy they released into the world, often in a form more piercing, more truthful, and more undeniable than they ever imagined. What they made you feel did not vanish. It traveled. It lingered in the atmosphere around them like a quiet witness, waiting for the right moment to return. And now, as they move through their days, they begin to notice patterns they cannot explain. Someone they trusted disappoints them. Someone they loved misjudges them. Someone they opened their heart to becomes indifferent, careless, or cruel. At first, they blame luck, then circumstances, then other people. But deep down, beneath the noise of excuses and denial, they feel something they cannot fully articulate. The sensation of walking through the very emotions they once forced you to endure. They are tasting their own bitterness, not because life is cruel, but because life teaches through reflection. There is a moment every person who hurts a good soul eventually faces it, when they feel the sting of the pain they once caused. It comes unexpectedly, catching them off guard. They may be sitting in silence, feeling misunderstood. They may be trying to offer love to someone whose heart remains cold. They may be begging for clarity from someone who refuses to communicate. They may be longing for loyalty from someone who treats them exactly as they once treated you, and in that moment something inside them shifts. Their mind may not recognize it, but their soul does. Their soul whispers, softly but firmly, "This is what you did to someone who cared for you." Life is not punishing them, it is revealing them. It is showing them who they were in the moments when they believed no consequences would find them. It is allowing them to look into a mirror shaped from their own behavior, forcing them to confront the truth they wanted to avoid. The universe is not cruel, it is exact. It measures every intention, every action, every silent wound. What they dismissed as harmless becomes the very thing they now struggle to navigate. What they inflicted lightly becomes the weight they now carry heavily. They may wonder why relationships fall apart, why trust slips through their fingers, why connections feel unstable, why the people they choose treat them with detachment or disregard. They may think they are merely unlucky, but what they are truly experiencing is a lesson disguised as loss, a correction disguised as heartbreak, a reflection disguised as destiny. They are meeting themselves, not the version they pretended to be, but the version who once failed you. And as these experiences accumulate, they begin to feel the guilt they once avoided, not the shallow guilt that appears after an argument, but the deep, soul-piercing awareness that they mishandled someone who meant them no harm. They begin to realize that your tears were not dramatic, your silence was not manipulative, your hurt was not exaggerated. It was real, so real that life itself chose to repeat it back to them so they could finally understand its magnitude. This is why they feel haunted, not by you, but by truth, not by your presence, but by their actions. Life does not forget the heart it witnesses breaking, and so, piece by piece, it delivers the same emotional weight back to the one who caused it, not to destroy them, but to awaken them, to humble them, to teach them what they refused to learn when your heart was still within their reach. Now they walk through the very storms they created. Now they endure the silence they once imposed. Now they sit with the ache they once ignored in you. And as each lesson unfolds, they understand something they never saw before. The pain they gave you was not the end. It was the beginning of their own reckoning. You became the unforgettable soul because you loved without pretending. That is something their mind cannot erase, even if their pride tries to. There is a rare kind of person who enters a life quietly, yet leaves a mark that outlasts every loud, temporary presence. You were that kind of person. You moved with sincerity when others moved with calculation. You spoke from the heart when others spoke from insecurity. You cared without using your care as a weapon. You loved without trying to impress, without seeking applause, without hiding behind masks. And this kind of authenticity is impossible to forget, especially for someone who lived behind walls of their own making. In a world where most people love conditionally, selectively, or strategically, your love felt like a breath of honesty they were not prepared for. They did not know how to value it, but they cannot erase it. Your truthfulness, your transparency, your emotional courage, these things linger, echoing in the corridors of their memory long after you left. What haunts them is not merely who you were to them, but who you revealed them to be to themselves. Your love exposed their lack of depth. Your loyalty exposed their inconsistency. Your sincerity exposed their fear. You weren't just part of their life. You were a reflection of what they could have been had they chosen honesty over pride, vulnerability over control, and courage over comfort. They tried to pretend that your presence didn't affect them, but the soul doesn't lie. It recognized something in you that it longed for but did not know how to hold. Your authenticity offered them a kind of emotional safety they had never experienced before, and that kind of safety leaves a lasting imprint. You awakened something in them simply by being real, and the soul never forgets the person who awakened it. They may try to convince others that you were easy to walk away from, but their heart knows the truth. They have never met anyone like you since. Not someone who listens without judgment. Not someone who forgives with humility. Not someone who loves without keeping score. And every time life brings them emptiness, every time someone new lacks the patience you had, every time they feel misunderstood, every time they look for comfort and find none, they remember you, not because they want to, but because your presence had substance. You were not noise. You were meaning. You were not an option. You were alignment. You were not temporary. You were transformative. That is why they can never forget you. You see, when someone meets a soul like yours, they don't realize its value immediately. They assume that everyone has the same heart, the same depth, the same purity of intention. It is only after encountering the shallow, the unstable, the inconsistent, the self-serving, that they finally understand what set you apart. They begin to see that what you gave them effortlessly, others struggle to offer, even minimally. They begin to understand that your honesty had no agenda, your kindness had no manipulation, your love had no expiration date. You were genuine in a world that teaches people to be guarded. You were open in a world that teaches people to hide. You were pure in a world that teaches people to use each other. They cannot forget that contrast because it was the most truthful encounter their heart ever experienced. What sticks with them most is the way you made them feel, seen, valued, safe, and understood. These are feelings people chase their entire lives, and you gave them freely, without demand. Now they search for that feeling everywhere, not realizing that it came from the purity of your soul, not from the circumstances around you. They look for fragments of you in other people, hoping someone might carry even a small piece of what you once offered. But souls like yours do not appear twice. There is no copy, no replacement, no substitute. Once encountered, they remain unforgettable. And the irony is that while they once believed they could live without you, now they live with the quiet ache of knowing they were loved by someone irreplaceable. Your authenticity became the checkmate they never expected, not because you were trying to win anything, but because truth always wins against pretense. You were real in a world that rewards fakery. You were loving in a world that supports detachment. You were loyal in a world trained to flee. That is why they can never forget you. Not in this lifetime, not in the next. Their soul will always whisper your name, not out of obsession, but out of recognition, out of regret, out of a longing for what was once theirs but never truly appreciated. In the end, the truth stands unshaken. You were not the one who lost. You were the one who grew, the one who awakened, the one who walked away with your integrity intact and your spirit preserved. They are the ones left wrestling with the echo of what they carelessly abandoned, and though they may never say it aloud, their soul knows the weight of the truth they carry. You were a blessing they mishandled, a light they dimmed, a rare kind of love they treated as common. And now life, in its quiet and perfect wisdom, has shown them every angle of the story. Your worth, their blindness. Your sincerity, their indifference. Your depth, their shallowness. You stand today not as someone forgotten, but as someone unforgettable. You stand as the memory they cannot silence, the lesson they cannot outrun, the checkmate they never anticipated. But you do not stand in bitterness. You stand in strength. You stand in clarity. You stand in the quiet confidence of someone who understands that being unforgettable is not a curse. It is the natural consequence of living with a pure heart in a world that often misunderstands purity until it's gone. Their regret is not your burden. Their awakening is not your responsibility. Their longing is not your destiny. You are no longer defined by their choices. You are defined by your resilience, your authenticity, your ability to love deeply and walk away gracefully when your soul was no longer honored. Let their memories remain with them. Let their lessons shape them. Let their haunting belong to them. Your path continues forward. Their soul carries the rest.